This is the Starlab Deep Dive. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Starlab Deep Dive, the science podcast where we ask the right questions, go deep into the specifics, and interview experts about the hottest topics in science. I am Moritz, your host, and today is a big day for me on the podcast because I think this is probably the closest I've ever come to interviewing a celebrity. With 500,000 subscribers on his YouTube channel, Breaking Lab, and many more across his other social channels, Jakob seems to have found a way to excite people with his highly interesting science videos. Today we'll be chatting about something that isn't just dear to our hearts here at Starlab, but also part of Jakob's main mission, taking science mainstream, and along the way inspiring young people to consider a career in this interesting field. Stick around for a super interesting chat about Jakob, his story, the awareness problem that STEM subjects, and in particular science, are suffering from, the future of education, as well as how creators like Jakob might be changing the game when it comes to inspiring the youth of today. Enjoy! Jakob, hi, welcome. Welcome to the Starlab Deep Dive. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here, indeed. And I'm really looking forward to get into some interesting topics with you, like we already mentioned in the intro. But to kickstart this podcast, I think we need a little bit of background for our listeners out there who might not know you. A deep dive into the life of Jakob. So you were born, now you're sitting here with me. What happened in between? Can you give us the quick rundown?
There are a lot of things that happened, but probably you're most interested about how I became a science YouTuber. And it was the way that I started science with my PhD, and I've wrote about how educational science YouTube videos can help people learn. And I'm still writing on it. Then I did this other thing. I started a science YouTube channel, Breaking Lab. Which is a channel that where we talk about new technologies, news in science, also a lot about sustainability. And we were lucky. We're one of the biggest science channels in Germany, especially about new technologies. And now those two things are my job.
I like how you've combined sort of two things as well that you sort of found a passion in. And I can imagine it's quite difficult to sort of describe to someone who, I don't know, you meet for the first time or meet at a party, what it is that you do. So how do you describe yourself? Are you a YouTuber that's also interested in science, vice versa? Are you an influencer? How would you describe yourself?
Actually, when I'm at a party or get to learn new people, I'm most of the times I just say I'm a PhD student. Because it's very hard to explain to people what I do on YouTube, and I always get the same questions. This is why I just say I'm a PhD student. And
keeping it simple.
Funny thing is, the people have just one question, then what are you researching about? And then this topic is finished. What I like a lot. So but deep inside me, I think I'm a science enthusiast, and there's not the scientist Jacob and the science YouTube Jacob. They're all combined.
Okay, interesting. So I guess for our listeners out there, I need to provide a little bit of context as to why I'm interviewing you here today. And as a lot of you probably already know, and if you don't, go check out the older episodes of the Starlab Deep Dive. Last year on World Laboratory Day, Starlab started a journey with the purpose of shining a light on people working in the field of science and showing the world how important these jobs, but also the people working in them actually are. And at the same time, we wanted to celebrate how interesting science is, because it's often perceived to be quite boring, monotonous, hours of pipetting alone in the lab and things like that. But that's not the truth, actually, is it? And I guess you know that better than anyone else. And I had the pleasure of interviewing a lot of people last year who also spoke about the subject with me. And you can go listen to those interviews in previous episodes, like I said. And what was confirmed was that there seems to be a misconception about what it really means to be a scientist. And in response to that, Starlab wanted to show the world the many facets, the interesting people, the colors of science at the end of the day. And Starlab conducted another study this year to sort of deepen our understanding of this issue. And in a survey of 2,000 young people in Germany and in the UK, we again confirmed that most young people don't really have a clear picture about what it means to work in a laboratory or be a scientist. And you also just mentioned you get a lot of questions on the subject if you do sort of mention it. So I'd like to unpack that a little bit with you. I believe you're in a very special position to also speak to that subject. So is it something that you've experienced as well? Do you also have to constantly explain to people what you do, what it means? Do you get a lot of questions, so comments, DMs, and things like that?
Of course, I see that many people have a very different picture about scientists. Many people think, oh, probably old persons in laboratories mixing stuff together and something explodes, or a new technology is created that creates energy or so. But in reality, I think scientists have many things that they do. I sometimes I'm reading a lot of research to prepare for a paper. Then there's times where I go on congresses to showcase my research. Then I have to go outside into the field to do my research. And there are so many aspects of being a scientist that I totally understand why it's hard to explain what a scientist does. But I think this is something very beautiful because, as you already mentioned, science is bright. It has many colors, and you can choose what you want to do. If you want to be more in the laboratory or go on a lot of congresses, I think you have in some parts the ability to control where your focus is. And I think this is pretty beautiful. So the real picture of a scientist should be a very bright picture with many things that this person does.
I like that idea of being able to sort of choose your path, the one that sort of tickles your fancy the most. And I talked to Ray last year, for example, as well about her career path and the many twists and turns that it took from, clinical analysis all the way up to research on ventilators for COVID, for example. And obviously, this is a huge breadth of stuff, and I'm aware of that. And that's why I think it's so interesting that 500,000 people are watching your videos regularly. So you have 60 million views on your channel, 25,000 followers on Instagram, further 70,000 on TikTok. And I was just wondering, you must be doing something right. So have you sort of identified the secret sauce that is making people interested in your video? Or do you think you were just right time, right place? Or what makes people really drawn to you and your style of content?
Of course, there are many aspects. We tried to figure it out. We did some research at the university to get a closer look on what gets people interested in educational science videos. And I think one of the main aspects is that we at Breaking Lab, we always try to, first of all, take science really seriously, because I write paper myself. I have to read them a lot for my research. So I know that if I read an article about a paper, most of the times the article doesn't really show what the scientists want to say, because an article has to show us, oh, there's this great new technology, and we just want to show you this. But if you read the paper, you see, oh, the scientist already said, there's a problem and there's a problem, and we have to figure it out together. And this is what makes science interesting, because if we already had all the solutions, we wouldn't do research. So, and I think this might be something that's special about Breaking Lab, because we try to get a closer look. We use the original papers for our videos. We're very transparent with our sources. So people can check them themselves, and we try to get a deep dive into it without losing anybody, because we always take the viewer's perspective who might not studied physics and try to understand how can we explain it that everybody understands it.
You're definitely succeeding. I watched a lot of your videos in preparation for this interview, and I was able to understand, although I'm not a huge physics fan. I mean, I guess followers and statistics are one thing, but do you also get a lot of feedback from your community that lets you know that what you're doing is really impacting people in their approach to science?
Totally. That's so cool about my job, because I got so many comments from people who said, "Oh, in school I didn't like physics or natural science at all, and now I'm interested into it, and now I'm considering to study it." And also I got some message from people who say, "All right, I started studying physics because of your videos, and sometimes I talk about when I studied." And it seems people get excited about it too, and this is the greatest feedback I can get. So yeah, it's incredible.
I can imagine.
It's really incredible, that have such an impact on people's life, and I love to hear that people get interested in science. And actually, because you asked about the secrets behind Breaking Lab, I think one comment I read a lot is that people think that they feel my excitement for a topic. And so they are also excited because they see how excited I am. And maybe this is part of the secret, because I am really interested in all the stuff we do. There's not one video where I would say, I don't think this is important, or I'm not interested into it. So maybe this is also part of the secret.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, you can really feel the passion that goes into your videos, and also the depth of research and things like that. So I have to say that definitely, even just without having known that, I would have said that that's definitely one of the aspects that makes your videos so interesting. And I think you just touched on something really interesting there. Because one interesting fact that sort of came to my attention while doing the round of interviews last year with a bunch of different scientists from different areas, from different countries around the globe, was that how much of an important role for them people in their lives played at an early stages of their fascination. So nearly everyone I spoke to could remember that one teacher or that one person or a parent that was particularly inspiring towards their journey that they ended up taking in science. And I just wanted to hear from you, do you have a similar story as well? I mean, obviously now you're playing that role for other people, so you are the inspiring person, but did you notice as well in your childhood that there was maybe a teacher or a parent that particularly inspired you to go this path?
Sure, I had many inspiring people. For example, I had a very good physics teacher, and he let us do small projects in his class, and we could build anything we want in it, and then we have to explain the physics behind it. And I built this small RC plane from scratch, and it was great because I had to learn the physics to get it working, and understanding the physics helped me to get it working. And so I experienced firsthand that physics is all around us, and this was really, really great and inspiring. And later in life, of course, I had many very good professors, and of course my PhD supervisor, Andre Breskes, he was very inspiring to me, because he showed me the importance of education in science, and that it is important to get people interested first at all, and that to get people interested you have to take their perspectives, because not all people are like the people I studied with physics, that are people that are interested about every part in science, and there's mathematics, I love it, and there's a very complicated formula, I love it. And you have to take the perspective of people who might not be that interested yet, hopefully, or who don't have this background to understand all those things. So he was very inspiring to me too, because without this input from him, I probably wouldn't consider to think that much about other people's opinions and views on topics.
I guess that must also be part of the secret sauce, sort of some empathy as to how other people sort of see a problem or see a certain subject and trying to make it digestible for them. So, for example, for someone like me who's not exactly versed in the subject of physics, I found your videos very, very interesting and very digestible, even though, we were talking about complex subjects. So I think that that's also an interesting aspect. And I think another interesting thing is that obviously a lot of people when they're younger, they have sort of these dreams of becoming something, some sort of job that tickles their fancy. And in the study that Starlab conducted, we actually also asked participants what they wanted to be when they were younger. And next to sort of the most common answers of policeman, firefighter, or doctor, there was also animal caretaker or zookeeper, for example. Only 1.4% said that they wanted to be something like a lab technician, for example. Can you remember when your journey started? Did you always want to be something in the field of science, or was it also policeman and then it switched around once you got good at physics or was interested in that?
I think the most I can imagine or recognize is that I wanted to become an engineer. I always loved building stuff and figuring out solutions. I built robots when I was younger and other technical stuff. And I always was very interested in technology and the science behind it.
Very cool. Yeah, I think the early stages of sort of a fascination for science are really important. So what about other STEM subjects? So science, technology, engineering, you already mentioned, mathematics. Did they all sort of come naturally to you, or was that something you had to work on because you found it so interesting?
Had to work on. I think that's I always loved to work on it, and probably this was why it got pretty easy to me. But I think it's all about I was interested into the subject, and that made it a lot easier to learn it, to read stuff about it, to exercise it a lot because I was interested in it. And I think this is the most important thing, that you have to get people interested into a subject. And even if they might not be the perfect mathematicians, but if they're interested into the subject and understand why they have to do this and why it will help them doing it, then it will get way easier for them to learn this. So I think it was easier for me because I was very interested early age into the subjects, but I don't think that I was so gifted that it was easy. I think it was more that I was really interested into it.
I like how you said that, because there's a quote I saw from Simon Sinek the other day. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but a very prominent figure, obviously, in the motivational and marketing area. And he sort of said that passion is the result of finding something that you want to work at for a long time. And I sort of like that, because obviously a lot of the time nowadays we're telling people to find their passion or find something that you love, and it's like, okay, great, but maybe that needs to develop over time as well. You find something that you're interested in, then you keep working at it, and that sort of is the definition of passion. And I think you just described that very nicely. So also very, very similar to what we found when interviewing a lot of people, that these sort of early days of being interested in science, obviously being in school, having good teachers and things like that are super important. And that's why I think these last 2 years have been such a struggle in general for a lot of people. So I think we need to touch upon COVID as well, obviously. It hasn't been particularly easy for students, or any of us for that matter, for the past 2 years. And the pandemic has impacted all of our daily lives. And according to our study, this actually caused a bit of a shift in what people are considering as interesting career paths or fields that they might be interested in. So do you think that that might be a little bit of a bittersweet lining to the pandemic? Has 2 years of COVID sort of showcased what science really is, what it can do for us as humanity, given people a new purpose in that sense? Or do you think it's brought it back onto the radar of many people?
Yeah, I think, of course, it was more in the media, so more people talked about it, and it's getting more interested. And also people saw, oh, this is a field where I can change the world, literally.
Right.
And I think that helped it. I think what might be even more important is that this shows us that it's so important to talk about science, to get people interested in science, and maybe also to get people thinking, oh, science is something cool. It's not something lame. It's cool, and that would motivate more people probably to learn about science, but also maybe choose a career in science. So maybe the pandemic showed us that this is very important. And if you think one step further, you see, how should many people get in touch with science if their parents were not scientists? So I think we have to figure out ways to show people what science is about and what science can do. And that's part of what I want to do on my channel, is to show people there are so many cool things that are happening. And like I already said, many people wrote to me and said, oh, I never was interested in that, but now I am. And I think great, because this is what should happen. You should see how great science is, and then you get interested into it, and maybe then you choose a career in it. And it's so important we get more people into science, because we are missing good people in there. I think this is really important. And one more thing I wanted to add, because the pandemic was very, very hard, I think, for students. And it was also pretty unfair, because many students who didn't had so much help from home had struggled to keep up. And to be honest, our digital educational tools in Germany are often not that good. And this is a huge problem. And for some time, I hoped, oh, this will change now, because, for example, with Breaking Lab, we made this Mint live streams where we did like physics classes and showed, for example, we had physics classes where we made many experiments. For example, with the Tesla, we pulled a blanket away. Which is pretty cool. And
you mean like the magic trick when the things stay on the table and you pull the blanket out underneath? Okay, interesting. Yeah,
right. This one, and we did this to show what inertia is, and of course it's way cooler. We did it with the Tesla, with a famous YouTuber, and I think 500,000 people watched this live stream.
Wow!
So there were many people who suddenly watched a school science show. It was school topics in their free time. And I think what's so important about this is it shows us we have this very strong tool of digital educational formats like videos, but also games and stuff like this. And we should use them, not to compensate school, because we would never replace school. We have no way to go in depth that much. We also don't have the possibility to learn with the students, but we can be one part. A video or a live stream can be a little part in it that, for example, gets them interested. And then a teacher takes this one and looks with the students, why did the Tesla was able to pull the blanket and the stuff stayed on the table? And I think this is a very, very important lecture from the pandemic that we should use and prepare better next time. I hope we do it.
Yeah, no,
I'm afraid we are not.
Yeah, but I think that's a really interesting aspect as well that you mentioned, that it's sort of one part of a good education, getting people interested in subjects, maybe in ways that you're not able to replicate at school. I mean, it's not realistic that every science class in Germany goes outside and sort of uses a Tesla to pull away the tablecloth. But at the same time, I feel like what you've just said is basically that through the pandemic, tools like YouTube education, for example, or science videos on YouTube have become much more important than they ever were before, but have also become much more recognized as an instrument in order to get the youth sort of inspired about this subject. And within that sort of lies my next question for you. When did you sort of realize that this was something that you needed to do for yourself? So how come you're trying to inspire the youth? Is this something that sort of happened naturally, or was there sort of a decision point where you noticed a need for this kind of material? What was your journey in terms of not only keeping your interest and your wisdom to yourself, but also wanting to share it with others?
Good question. I think I already, when I was younger, I loved to learn new stuff and talk to people about it. I talked to everybody about, for example, the robotics and how they work, and I was really excited about it. So yeah, I think I always loved to do it. And then when I got older and I got interested into science education, and didactics, and I saw, we are missing something there. We have so many people who could be interested in science, and especially for me physics, that are not interested because we're doing it the wrong way. And of course, this was the motivation for me to get people interested with videos in science, because this way I had the possibility to easily reach a lot of people and show them what is happening in the world and how science has an influence on it. So that's a huge motivation. But also I think it's important to mention that it's not so novel that I do this. Of course, I try my best to improve the life of many people, but I also want to mention that I love learning. I love making videos about it. So I'm living my dream right now. So I think it's important too to see that I'm really, really grateful that I can do what I do right now. And I love to see that people are interested in it, and I love to get those messages where people say, "Oh, no, I'm interested in science and I'm studying it." So that's the best thing that could happen to me.
I think it's also the best way to inspire others, by sort of being infectious with your own passion, right? And we've seen it work time and time again on YouTube, whether it's, whatever subject it may be. And I'm glad to see that it also works in sort of science, because I think I talked to Oliver Schenker last year as well. He's head of the Hamburg School of Life Sciences. I did an interview with him. And one of his theories was that exposure is the biggest problem in science, that people aren't exposed enough to the fascination or the fascinating aspects of science. And once they are, they're actually really, really interested. But before that, they sort of have this misconceived picture of what it is actually science is and what scientists do. Where do you think that comes from? Is that something that you've been able to identify, or even have you experienced the same thing?
I think there are two reasons. One, we already mentioned, that how should people get interested in something they never saw? Like, if their parents are not scientists, how should they know this is something cool to do? And I think the second part is, my professor, André Beskes, he has this theory, which is covered by research, that there are different types of learners in science, because people are getting interested differently in it. And there's one type, the A type, which are people you meet when you study physics and natural science, because most of the time those people are interested in everything in science. It's you give them formulas and they're interested in it. You have complex theories and they're interested in it. And you don't have to make much effort to get those people interested into it. But then there are other people you have to get interested, for example, by showing them what this has for an influence in their daily lives. And then there are other people who are more interested into the society or in the environment. And you have to show those people that science is important for this. And if you do this, you get those people. But most of the time, the problem is the people who are teaching in school or at the university are more like type A people who don't see, oh, maybe people aren't excited when I talk about Schrödinger's equation. So I have to show them why this has an effect in their life, or why this is important for our society. So I think, this is something that is really, really important, to take those people's perspective, to get them interested. And we have a long way to do this, because if you are not taught as a type A person to do this, you probably won't do it because you don't know it. And like I said, the people who are teaching the teachers are most of the time type A people, and the teachers themselves are also most of the time type A teachers in natural science. And this might be part of the problem.
Interesting. Have you identified sort of where you slot into that? Are you type A, B, or C? Have you thought about that?
I'm probably a type A person.
So just fascinated about everything.
Yeah, I really. It's hard to explain, but if you study physics, most of the stuff you do is mathematics. But I don't know. It was always very interesting for me, and I loved when I finished an exercise or an equation, and it gives you something. But like I said, my PhD supervisor, he helped me understand this, and I think now I'm way better in identifying the problems for other people. And I think that's one of the main things I do on my YouTube channel, to see a hard topic, and of course you have to work yourself into it, that you understand it. But then the most important part is to translate it. And also when I'm talking to scientists, and I've talked to several Nobel Prize winners, and my main part of my work there was to translate it, to ask them, did I understand it right? Is it like this way? So people who are not studied,
who are not
physics,
Nobel Prize winners,
who are not Nobel Prize winners, could relate to it. And I think that's the most important part on my job.
Very cool piece of research and theory there. Obviously, that sort of links to something as well, which is, you mentioned purpose in there. And I think that has a lot to do with, sort of awakening that purpose in people might also be part of the secret in fascinating people for science. And I mean, we asked 2,000 young people from the UK and Germany what they thought the job of a laboratory technician or scientist sort of entails. And only 38% of the students surveyed said that these professions were valued, which I find super interesting because, once you see sort of the applications to real world, and that science is everywhere, all around us, I find it very hard to believe that if people were aware of that, then only 38% of people would say that, this is a valued profession, because especially with COVID now, we see how these people who are partially working in the shadows or behind the scenes are actually making a huge impact on our daily lives in a positive sense, of course. So why do you think it is that laboratory professions are perceived as not valued? Is it really just this lack of exposure?
On the one side, it might be lack of exposure, but on the other side, probably there are cliches about it, and they are. I think a lot of TV shows, for example, they improve those cliches, because if you see a laboratorian in any TV show, in any especially American TV show, they're also always very nerdy, and often they are not shown as as a hero in the story. And I think this might be part of the problem. And also, of course, in pandemic, they were important, so important for us. But I think because you don't see their work and don't see in television, you always just hear about, there's a new vaccine created, but you don't see them working. And I think that's part of the problem, that many people don't make the connections. Of course, for us, it's logically that they are important for our society, but many people probably won't think about it that much. So probably to get a better image for them, you would have to show them and have to show heroes from it, and to show why it is great what they do, and make it accessible for all the people, also the people who are not so interested into it by themselves.
Yeah, I like that idea of sort of taking people along on a journey, right? And sort of showcasing the process, but also then the result in order to get them excited. So I guess that's part of a solution. But what is it? I mean, when we talk about education and things like that, obviously your videos are one part. Is there something else you would like to see when it comes to solving sort of the skills shortage in the sciences? Is there something that you can imagine would work very well, or that you think needs to happen in the next couple of years before we sort of really have a problem?
Many things. For example, like I already said, videos are a benefit, but school is the most important thing. Teachers, the most important job right now, I think. One of the most, maybe the most important, because teachers, they should educate our doctors. And
they're in charge of our future, indirectly.
They're in charge of everything, and every individual. So I think it's very important to, first of all, maybe improve their image, because I think many people have a bad image, or think bad about teachers. And of course, there are teachers that are maybe not working so much, or I don't know what are all those cliches. But there are many teachers who are pretty different. And maybe we should celebrate more those teachers who are very different and do great stuff, and we should help those teachers and not always look on some teachers that are not working as much as they maybe should. So I think this would be very important, and maybe we should think about how we can make tools accessible for everybody. For example, I already talked about those digital educational tools. Some schools performed very well in the pandemic and had no problems with it. But other schools had huge problems. And what this shows to me is that if a school could handle the pandemic or not has nothing to do with our educational system. This has to do something with the individuals in the school. And if there are some teachers that put a lot of effort into creating digital content for the students, but maybe this is not what it should be like. Maybe we as a society or politicians should give them the tools to have good digital classes and not let them just create. I heard a lot from teachers who created own videos and digital materials with tests and so on, and which was extremely time consuming. And also you have to be interested in technology and computers to be able to do this. And there are many teachers who are, and this is no problem because it's not their job, are not so interested into how to set up a Zoom call or how to create an online quiz. And I think that's so important that we figure out how we can help those teachers and how we can create a system that gives them the opportunity to make good digital classes.
I like that, sort of a multi-point approach coming from different angles. So you have the extracurricular stuff like your own work. You have sort of the teachers who need to be placed on a pedestal and really shown that those are the heroes of our society, which, by the way, check out the newest video on our Colors of Science landing page where we do exactly that. We dive deep into a teacher that has gotten an award recently for her style of teaching. And I think that's, at Starlab, we agree that that's one of the most important things we need to do. And then you sort of have the systematic changes, right, which you just mentioned, that need to sort of really have a hard look at how we're sort of enabling teachers in order for them to teach better or more effectively. So I really like that idea of coming from multiple angles. I guess one of my last questions for you is, imagine that we do a recap podcast in like 10 years' time or something like that. How would you say, how do you picture the future? Do you think you've accomplished your mission? We're going to have lots of people interested in science. And how would that world look? What's your ideal version of a future?
I think the mission is never finished because there are always new people born that got to be interested in science. And I think it's important to create new stuff for those people, because I don't know if you remember when you watched movies when you were younger and you said, oh my goodness, it's so great. They will never be able to make a video or a movie look better than now. And
right.
Of course,
we are
always improving.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think it's so important to keep doing this. And if I could wish in the future, I think it would be so cool if we would all work together more hand in hand. For example, me as a science YouTuber, I would wish that I would work more hand in hand with schools and universities. At the moment, I sometimes have the feeling that everybody is doing their own stuff, and sometimes it's hard to connect it. And I think this would be great if, like we mentioned before, all those tools we have, we could put them together to make the most incredible learning experience for all the young people out there, and for everybody. You could make it accessible for everybody, and right. I think this would be great. More education for everybody in a higher quality.
I like that. Maybe we need to take inspiration from the subject that we're talking about, because the interconnectedness of science nowadays and the interdisciplinary approach, without that, none of the past 2 years would have probably been possible. The international approach to solving problems is really there. So let's use that spirit, right? Let's use that idea and also apply it to educating the youth. I think that's a very beautiful idea. Jakob, I think we've reached the end of our podcast here. Thank you so much for taking the time today to have a chat with me, going through some really cool topics, getting your opinion on things. I think Starlab is doing a great job of shining a light on how cool the field of science is, but obviously people like you are really needed in this field to take a next step and really be someone who is as passionate as you are and share it with people out there. So thank you very much for talking with me today, and also thank you very much for creating such amazing work that we could discuss today.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and also thank you for working together on this. So my idea of the future, we fulfill it right now a little bit.
One step closer.
One step closer to a better future. That's great.
Perfect. Thank you, Jakob. Thank you also to our listeners out there. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Starlab Deep Dive. Make sure to check out Jakob's stuff at the Breaking Lab on all of the social channels you can imagine. And also, of course, if this was your first time listening to an episode of our podcast, make sure to head over to your podcast player of choice. Check out the other episodes, give us a follow or a rating, or even drop us a line on Instagram at Starlab International. Or visit us on LinkedIn, where you can also find a lot of our stuff. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope to see you next time on the Starlab Deep Dive.